That was David Malpass. He is former president of the World Bank Group, and Judy Shelton joins us as well, senior fellow at the Independent Institute and former Trump economic advisor. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. Merry Christmas to you both. Judy, first to you. You know, you read the mainstream media, and it's an absolute reverse universe from what we just heard Darren describe. I mean, it's glum. Only the rich are getting richer. The middle class is getting poor, and the poor is somewhere down below ground. Business people have a very different attitude. I've never seen as many incentives in policy since early on in the Reagan administration. You have to go back 40 years to have a president that's put forth as many deregulatory special orders in addition to a big, beautiful bill which had tax deductions in it. I sense great optimism for 26. What about you?
Oh, definitely. And I think that President Trump has every reason to sit back and gloat. I mean, he really deserves to say, "I told you so." And it's really quite amazing that growth rate is tremendous, GDP growth. And in spite of this message that, oh, maybe the Fed has to lower rates because of unemployment, really employment is at a pretty good level. It's not that you lower rates out of weakness. It's because you want to provide the capital to continue feeding this real economic growth. And it's not just the artificial financial growth. It's really Main Street. Yes. And I think we rejoicing in that kind of real economic growth.
Well, Judy, there was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal today about a mid-size, small to mid-size business in Louisiana. They make containers for electrical outlets and stuff. I mean, that's real mainstream stuff. They just were bought out by a big company, but as a result, because you're hearing that it's only the rich get richer. But in this case, the seller insisted that they include a bonus for the 540 workers in the field. The average bonus was about $433,000 for each one of the workers that was there. This is a benefit for all the stories about the heartlessness of capitalism, et cetera. This is really what capitalism is about, is it not?
And I love that story, but that's the emphasis. It's when you appreciate capitalism, you see that it increases the size of the pie. It's not about redistribution. And that's the difference. Democratic capitalism is empowering to individuals, as opposed to socialism, which just empowers government at the expense of the private sector. And here you unleash the entrepreneurial energy, you put pride in honest work, people who make things and who produce goods and services and provide a higher standard of living for the fellow man. All of that through free markets is so much more not productive, but prosperous for everyone, and they share in that prosperity.
And David, while the idiots in New York City voted in a Marxist mayor for the capital of capitalism in the Western world, the folks overseas seem to get it. They get the fact that there's nothing like free market capitalism to lift people out of poverty. No economic system has done as much for that in the history of mankind as we have. The extraordinary private charity, we should mention, on the part of American capitalists for all of the worthy causes in the United States is unequaled anywhere in the world. Of course, also it combines with the technological discoveries that you have given our system and the freedom to pursue various avenues of research that led to the tech revolution in the 80s and the new AI revolution now.
That's right, and Happy New Year on that note, David, and hi to Judy. 2026 is setting up to be another really good year. One thing that I noticed in that Louisiana story is small businesses then become bigger and bigger businesses, and that really is a unique to America's story, and one that I think we have to really keep going forward with. One notable thing that we saw when the 4.3% GDP growth number came out, this very strong quarterly growth number that President Trump highlighted, he made the point that the Fed should not stand against growth. If we have faster growth, we can have lower interest rates because we're more creditworthy. And I think lower bond yields because we're more creditworthy. He really body slammed the Fed because the Fed was out even early this week complaining about the growth rate being too fast. That's inherent in the Fed's models. I think we need sweeping reform of the Fed because otherwise they're going to choke off the recovery, or I mean the expansion.
That's right. But David, you also, from your old perch at the World Bank, you must look out and see what the world is doing. They're rejecting socialism all over the world right now. You just had these Spanish elections. They were regional, but it shows that the socialist government there is in deep trouble. You have what's happening in Latin America is extraordinary. You had another election that kicked out the socialists in Honduras. Of course, the same thing happened in Argentina, in Bolivia, in Chile. It's just about, if it happens in Venezuela, and we're going to be talking about that a little later on, that means that Cuba and Nicaragua will probably get rid of their socialist governments as well. So the rest of the world who's experimented with socialism realizes it doesn't work. It's the people like us, the newbies that haven't gotten around to having real socialism until now, that are going to discover it doesn't work. But we have to go through this process, which I'm not looking forward to, at least in New York.
That's right. In most of the world, maybe not New York City, if you give people the chance to vote of whether they want to be better off next year, they are uniformly going to say yes. The problem is that the economics community is often saying, tut, tut, that's too fast a growth rate. President Trump talked about it in that Truth Social on Tuesday. He said, if you let the eggheads stop the growth, then you're going to cut off the expansion. And so in Latin America and in Spain, as you're talking about, it's very important that the central banks not operate to choke off the growth rate, that they allow it. If people get sound money anywhere in the world, all of a sudden they get better and better off. It's enabling, and I think we're at that brink of that opportunity.
Well, and we have this affordability flap now that everybody's talking about. It started on the left, even though the left was the one who started the unaffordability of buying a house, for example. That really started during the Biden administration, where we went from about $1,300 a month, Judy, if you owned a house in payments, to $22,700 a month that we have now, more than double. I mean, it's extraordinary. They caused this problem of affordability, and now they're pointing their finger at Trump for it. But you look at the prices of gas and energy in general, except in the blue states, it continues to go down.
I think that the Trump administration is solving those problems. And instead of just complaining about affordability, they were dealt a bad hand. And they are making major moves, especially on energy, to change that arc, and we're seeing it pay off. And I think what people who are more inclined towards socialist redistribution have to think is that we're witnessing that you can bring down inflation at the same time you're getting the growth, and that's because it is productive growth. And so that's not when you quit feeding access to capital. That's when you want to expand, especially for small business, the ability to expand plant and equipment, to hire people, to increase the output. That's how you fight inflation, not by complaining about growth.
Well, Judy, you understand it. Of course, David understands it. And I understand that the new entries into the Fed that are going to be appointed in next year understand it as well. But you have this bureaucracy of 300 economists, most of whom don't get it. How does the new leadership at the Fed turn that around?
I think you have to challenge the models that are used at the Fed. It should be obvious because they were so wrong. I think back to when Chair Powell last May at the Economic Club in Chicago was saying that, well, everyone I know believes that tariffs are going to cause inflation. Well, I think he needed a wider circle of friends and consultants because he ended up being proved wrong. And who knows how many businesses were denied access to capital because the Fed was relying on that sort of Keynesian thinking.
Yes.
So it's very important that you have someone at the Fed who can not only explain in a better narrative way how it all fits together, monetary and fiscal policy, but who can persuade their fellow members that growth is not our enemy and that the Fed should not be interfering with what's working.
And David, final word to you. What about the central banks around the world? We know that there's political change afoot. We mentioned that happening all over the world as socialist economies, people realize it doesn't work. What about the central banks? Is there an awakening in central banks abroad to this idea that you can have strong growth with low inflation?
I don't think so, David. There's strong resistance within the economics community. Judy was just naming it, but let's name the models that is the core of the current anti-growth economics profession. The Phillips curve, the Nauru model, the output gap model, potential GDP, the backward-looking inflation data, all of those are wrong. They've been disproven.
Yeah.
And to get them out of the system is going to be a huge effort. It's a global effort. Each of the central banks feeds on each other and maintains power, and they expand power, as is our current Federal Reserve. They're expanding every week with new announcements about what they're going to buy, and they're not laying off any people. The rest of the government is, they're not.
Yeah. Well, the global bureaucracy has to change. The people's will is important, and it has to be heard. Judy and David, great to see you.